Well, this is volume 9 of the Around Antwerp series, and we've been to sprint lofts, we've been to middle distance lofts, we've been to long distance lofts. On all occasions we've had people talking about the medical side of the business, the veterinary side of the business, and the products they use. So I thought it would be helpful and interesting if we came to a guy that I personally and many others regard as the #1 vet in the pigeon world, and that is Henk de Weerd. Henk's with me today here. We're at his practice in Breda. We'll have a look round the clinic later on, but I mean, people come here with the pigeons from all over the place. In fact, he was telling me that this morning he's had some guys from southern France, from the Touquet, he's had them in from Germany, from Holland, from Belgium, from everywhere. And his products go all over the world. They're well known worldwide. Henk, how long have you been in the practice now?
Dave, that's about since '72, so it's about 33 years now.
33 years.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I mean, you
I was a student, of course, prior to that, right. But since I was a young kid, I already went with my father to many lofts in Belgium, in Holland, in Germany, as a small kid. So I went to all those famous names, all those old Flanders tigers or whatever they are.
And of course your father, Piet de Weerd, is probably the world's best selector of pigeons. I mean, he's made many lofts famous.
That's right, yeah,
I remember him when he flew as Vandenbroek de Weerd.
That's correct. Yeah,
that's a long time ago.
Well,
but he's made the loft of Hermes, he's made many lofts.
That's right. He was always very good in picking good pigeons at good lofts, and making breeding pairs together. Also at Fabry, he made a famous pair, as you know.
Was that Porthos?
Porthos and Heroine.
Heroine, yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And at Hermes, and in Mexico, and in the United States, the famous Red Put and Red Hen, and very famous in California, the old Van der Vlas pigeons. He was about the first, I think, to find these good Jensen pigeons, and to
the Van der Vlas pigeons. They were the red Jensens.
They were the red Jensens.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, he found them first, and he made them famous, as a matter of fact, in the United States, all over the world. Never with many pigeons, always with a few very good pigeons, and that's how he made also his name. And he could pick the pigeons out.
Good selector.
As a matter of fact, it's what I hear all over the world, and still everybody talks about him with dignity and with admiration, and it's nice for me to hear.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
Being a son of him, it's
but you've been brought up with pigeons.
Of course. From ever since I was born. I mean, it was only pigeons.
And now you fly in partnership with a guy called Curvers.
That's correct.
Curvers de Weerd. And last year you won the Pigeon International,
that was,
which must have been very satisfying. Yeah,
it was excellent, of course.
Yeah.
You have to have some luck.
Good for business.
Good for business. You have to have a little bit of luck, because there are, in my opinion, there are many good pigeons competing these races, but the right time and the right condition and a little bit of luck. But this was a nice race, because the birds went all over. Early birds in the west, in the east. So not only in one certain part, but it gives me a better feeling.
Good cross section, yeah.
Yeah, I would not be happy if all the pigeons are just in one side, because
wind blown up.
We like the tough competition, and it was an honest race, and it was a lower speed, so good pigeon, I think.
And there you specialise in overnight races.
Yeah, that's right. The international races. The five.
How many are there? Five or six?
We have 5. We have Pau, Barcelona, Marseille, Perpignan, and this DAX International. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. When fanciers visit your clinic, and I mean they come from all over the place, I mean there are very few lofts in Belgium that I've been to that don't use one or other of the De Weerd products. But when fanciers come to the clinic, I mean, what's the most common problem you find with the pigeons?
Well, the busiest time, of course, is the race season, and then they make an appointment, because we don't have open hours. I mean, well, we have open hours, but more or less I like to have to know a little bit who's coming, that it's not getting crazy and busy. And we can work on 2 rooms with a microscope, but the main problem, of course, in the season is just the complaint: my birds do not fly like I want them to fly, or my birds have been flying good so far, and now all of a sudden
drop off.
So please, can you tell me, can you look at my birds, can you do some research on them, some checks of the droppings and the throats and whatever, and the condition? And can you help me? Can you give me an advice? Can you give me some medicine? Something like that. I mean, but
what is the most common problem you find when they bring them in at that time of the year? So let's say during the racing season, what's the problem usually?
Well, that is very obvious, very clearly. Clearly is that the respiratory problems. Really, I mean, we also find canker sometimes, but canker is not really, it can make a combination, a little bit canker, but the onytosis by itself, that's really the main concern, the main problem. Flying 4 or 5 races steadily, high percentage of price, 40%, good in the top, in the front, and then all of a sudden a drop off, the birds come 5-6 minutes too late on the middle distance races and the short races. They come on the chain, but too late and no more, and then they're not flying well anymore the day after, and they lose 2 little down feathers, and the feathers are dry, and sometimes the ears stand off a little bit around.
The feathers on the ears, yeah.
And not really, not the first time, but if you keep going on with these pigeons, you know, it goes down and down and down every week.
How do you diagnose that problem?
Well, it's a matter of experience, Dave, because you can do you can search, you can take the swab, you can look at the droppings, but many times you find nothing wrong. So, but you cannot say the bird is okay. You can only say this is okay, that's okay, that's okay. But what is really wrong is all these small things in the head, the dry feathers, the plumage, around the ears,
and the skin.
And the skin turns not wet anymore. It's more getting a little bit blue. And the feathers are too dry, and they don't train, and I don't see the 4 or 5 down feathers, which I like to see every night. No more, it stops all of a sudden. And together with the complaint.
And the shine goes off the pigeon.
Of course, the shine goes off, and they come back home too light, they lose body weight all of a sudden, on the middle distance race. So then we know, well, this is respiratory problems, and we found that out over 30 years, and I know it already 20 years, because when you treat them for respiratory, it helps. So you can also put it the other way around. Even if you don't know what it is, you treat them for respiratory, and it helps. Right.
Now, so given that the guy comes in and he's got a problem with his pigeons, you find it's respiratory, what do you advise him to do? Does he stop racing?
No, not really, because most of the time it is not. Only very seldom I tell the guys, this is going to take you another 3 weeks. So don't race 3 weeks, because this takes me, more or less I can say from experience, this will take 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before you're back at stage. The sooner they come, having this drop, the quicker I get them back. If this takes a long time, it takes me a long time to get them back at stage. So I know pretty fast how bad it is, and if you can give them a little treatment about 3-4 days immediately after coming home, and then most of the time they'll be back within a week.
Right. So you see, what I'm trying to help the English fanciers is that in Holland, in Belgium, in Germany, and France to a degree, everyone has access to a veterinarian who is expert, or, well, if not expert, knows about pigeons. In England, that is not the case, as you know. Well, you might find probably at the most half a dozen. So what I'm trying to help the English fancier to do is to recognise the problem and know what to use. So if we say when a pigeon's got, you suggest, a respiratory problem, the foam goes down. I mean, I've always said that when the widow woodcocks look well, you can look at them on the box, they're facing you, they've got a ring round there, a nice ring of confidence, dawn feathers in the loft, fresh dawn feathers every morning, and throughout the day 2 or 3 dawn feathers, that's important. And that the throat is nice and pink, but particularly when you take the pigeon and you look across here, it should be like cling film paper. You know cling film? And clean and light and shiny. And one thing you said about, and it's something I picked up on about 20 odd years ago, I was reading a book which your father had written, and he's written quite a few books. And he said that when he was looking for pigeons, he was always looking for wet pigeons.
Yeah, that's right.
That means when you handle the pigeon, you feel underneath it like that, it should feel wet.
It's the quality of the muscle as well, and the quality of the condition, of course.
There aren't many pigeons like that.
Not too many.
Not too many, but when you get the good ones, the wet ones. I remember the DD. That was a particular pigeon which was very wet underneath.
Nice pigeon.
Yeah, good pigeon. There is long distance breeding.
Breeder also.
So the guy comes in, or the fancier can't come into the vet, but he recognises that the form's gone down. He's probably trepped for canker on a fairly regular basis. He might have trepped for worms at the beginning of the season, which is something we'll go into later. So he needs a product to be able to handle the respiratory side of it, or the ornithosis complex, which is all respiratory.
That's right.
Which one of your products would you recommend?
Well, we start most of the time, depending what if they have given already something as a prevention, which may be the case, but most of the time they didn't do anything.
You can't prevent anything, can you really?
Well, you can prevent a little bit if you just before basketing, more or less a prevention, then just to try to keep them from getting a respiratory infection during the transport.
In the season?
In the season, yes.
So you
talk about the season.
In the season. So you recommend that during the racing season, they give a product for respiratory or ornithosis complex when they come back or before they go?
Before they go. Before they go as a prevention, when they come back as a treatment, if they don't come home, good. Properly. If they have a problem coming home, I mean, the thing we said, 4 or 5 races, okay, then a drop, then a respiratory problem, then we have to treat them immediately. Don't wait, as soon as possible, because we have only 5 days before the next race, so we have to react quickly. And most of the time I recommend to give Oni Special, sometimes in combination with WN, because you make it a little bit broader.
WN, just explain that to the viewers, because Oni Special, you've got, where is Oni Special on there? Let's have a look.
Should be here, I think. This is red.
Yeah, that's the red
label.
That's Oni Special. And in combination with white noses.
WN, white noses. Do we have it here? Not
don't think so.
Really.
No. Anyway, it's a product similar to that.
We have also sachets.
Yeah, and so mix both products. If you've got a bad problem, you say mix the products together.
Mix it.
5 days?
Yeah, no, we don't have 5 days, and we don't need 5 days. Most of the time, we need only 3 or 4 days, very quickly. And the combination is a broader spectrum, so we have more chance to cure and to kill everything. I mean, whatever it is, we cannot kill the viruses. The chlamydia only maybe a little bit. The herpes we cannot kill. Ornithosis, as you know, is for me it's a combination. It's a box with problems: herpes virus, chlamydia, Haemophilus, maybe sometimes a little bit canker, sometimes E. coli bacteria, maybe streptococcus. It's a little bit of everything.
Right.
But the main things we can cure with products like Oni Special or Belgica. Sometimes we prescribe Belgica, mostly later in the season. Most of the time we start with this one. And we like to have some alternatives because on the very, very long run the birds may get a little bit used to it, and so you have to change. And
I was talking to Serge at last year.
Yeah.
That's a fairly new product you brought out, that, isn't it?
Yeah, the Belgica is maybe only,
couple of years?
In the meantime already, maybe 4 or 5 years.
Is it? Well, I know that Serge said he'd tried it last year and he found it an excellent product, as an alternative.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We had a lot of good fanciers in Holland and Belgium. I started trying it for really severe cases of ornithosis maybe 5 years ago. I found this on the market originally it's coming for poultry. It's a Japanese original product, and we found, and it was very effective, and I was very happy with it. And then we started to give it, and I said, just try. In the beginning, it's a trial. You try it, you report me, and we had a lot of very good reports. So then we started to promote it, and it did a good job.
And it's not. That's a cross section of fanciers from Germany, from Holland, from.
We start close by. Huh? We start close by. The guys you know very well, and these guys, whenever they have a problem, serious fanciers. I mean, guys, not a mediocre fancier. They're really the top guys because they give you the top information. Yeah. When they say it's not okay,
see it. They can see.
When they say no, I don't see it. But when they come back for a product,
and they say I can see the change,
and they get it free. If they don't come back, it's not good. Yeah. So it happens. It happens sometimes. I said, try this for free. But they don't come back, it's not okay. But if you give something, they come back immediately, that's okay. You know, and not only one time, but maybe.
Can I just ask you this whilst we're talking about these? Because they are antibiotics or classed as antibiotics, those products. Do you not feel that we're weakening the pigeon's immune system?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe in that.
You don't?
I don't believe in that because in 30 years I don't see this. We have still customers who fly over a long, long period. Fantastic, also the long distance, and also with birds of 6 years old. And they have been on a regular basis, but not overdone. Just give something if they need it, and don't give it if they don't need it. I mean, do it with use your brains when you do it, or do it in the contact with a good vet. I really don't see that the pigeons don't react anymore, even after 20 years. I do not see that the birds don't react anymore. I don't see that we kill some good germs in pigeons. I don't see that the droppings turn bad if you give antibiotics. I never see.
Do you think they become resistant? The pigeon?
No, I don't believe in it. And because these are most of the time combined combinations. Right. And in combinations, it's very difficult to get resistancy. Well, an example is, for instance, the treatment against HIV. Yeah. In humans. Now they have a multi-purpose drug, that's 3, and there is no problem with resistancy. Right. I mean, that works. Only one doesn't work, only A, B and C, for instance. If you give all 3, it works, and there is no danger for resistancy. And that's what not only we know, but many vets know it over many years that we know it already.
I think what is generally accepted in England is that we've got two categories of fanciers. We've got those who say you shouldn't treat for anything and it's all wrong, and then you've got the fanciers who have learned to treat in a proper manner. I think most people now realise that you've got to treat for trichomonas in a very in a measured, proper way. Now, I think the product you use for trichomonas is BS, isn't it? In fact, I know it is because I remember talking to Serge about it. He swears by it, Serge and Belgasol. And he treats 1.5 days when they come back from the race. Yeah. And then I think it's every 3 or 4 weeks he gives it them for 3 days. Is that on your recommendation?
That is
that what you recommend?
That is more or less something we recommend. Every week 1 day, every 2 weeks 2 days, every 3 weeks 3 days. Roughly spoken, it's the way it works because
over a 3-week cycle.
Yeah, if you only want to treat 1 time in 3 weeks, then you should do it 3 days. These are old.
So if you just treat once every 3 weeks, you treat for 3 days.
Yeah, more roughly spoken, this is a general rule, and this is knowledge from the University of Ghent. Right. Which I picked up in '71 already when I had a referate, a dissertation about canker. That is pretty much the truth. So that still is working. And the worst thing in the treatment of canker is to give too low a dose. If you give the dose too low, especially in the winter time, when you give something on the water, and the birds don't drink, you have a low dose. And then you make the canker more or less stronger. You understand? Yeah. So always give the proper doses.
So it doesn't become resistant.
Yeah, that's more important in canker than in any other disease, really.
I want to take you up on something there then. Talking to Eddie Grugens, he said to me that last year he used BS and Belgasol mixed, and he gave it for the first drink when they came back.
That's right.
Now, I've never done that. I've always given the electrolytes first until they had a drink, and then I've given. I've treated every 3 to 4 weeks for trichomonas for 3 days, but I'm going to use this system because I know so many fanciers in Belgium that have been using it successfully. But what I want to ask you is this: when the pigeon comes back and it's very, very thirsty, it can't overdose on the product then?
Well, not really, because we have a big margin of safety built inside. However, there is more professionalization in the pigeon sport, and people read more about articles, and then it's more or less a kind of mode. It became a mode in the mode. Not to give anything after coming home, just only plain water or water with sugar or electrolytes. So, whereas many people before used to give it immediately on coming home, and then they get a very good dose, of course. Nowadays, they, for these reasons, they don't like to give it immediately, so they give it the next day. There's nothing against it. So give them the electrolytes immediately on coming home, which is very good to build up the tissue fluid, but then give them the next day the treatment for canker, but make sure that your birds drink enough, because if you keep feeding them very with diet food, I mean, they also drink maybe not enough. So make sure they get the proper dose. Then I have no preference for the coming home or the day after.
If it's only a sprint race, an hour and a half, then the pigeon isn't so thirsty. If he's probably had a drink in the basket, so probably it's not so bad if he has a drink as soon as with the products in as soon as he comes home. But if you've got a pigeon 5 hours and above on the wing, when he comes home on a hot day,
maybe for a long distance race, he gets.
So he gets the electrolytes first, and then the BS.
Scientifically, maybe is better. The electrolytes are very important.
And can I just say that BS for the viewers? Can I just say that BS is a trichomonas treatment? It treats for trichomonas.
Yes, and
that's the thing.
Yeah, okay, this is BS in tubs. We also have it in sachets normally. This is for the bigger lofts. Also, this is 300 grams. We also have 150 grams, and we have the sachets, the little packets. The BS, well, it's not only for canker. It's also for to purify the blood a little bit, whatever that means to be. Because if you ask me what is purifying the blood, well, normally the kidneys are doing that. But it seems that they slow more down feathers, they turn, the body, flesh turns pink, nice pink. It also cures minor intestinal problems, also coccidiosis, it prevents it, it cures, yes. And also minor bacterial infections.
Right.
So it's a nice combination. And
so if we take that.
Also hexameta in the intestine, it kills hexameta, it is for mucous membranes infections from the crop and the throat, so it's really it's good product, good all-round product.
Belgica. That's electrolytes and
dextrose and amino acids and vitamins, and you feel how heavy this is. How heavy this is.
But after that together.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what many people do. Mm. But if you don't want to give any medicine, I have to respect anybody's idea about it, and many people have their own idea, and which I have to respect. So then, this is always very important when they are exhausted. Very important to give a product like this, and then the day after you can give this. If you don't like to give medicine immediately.
I've used that for 3 years, and I'll tell you what, you can tell the difference when you've used it.
Yeah.
You use that for 3 days and you tell the difference with your pigeons. If it's very, very hot in the summer, I give it the day of basketing as well.
Mm-hmm. Many people do that.
Yeah.
And I found it, guys doing this on one loft races in hot climates like in Thailand and in Taiwan and South Africa. And these loft managers, they don't speak one word English, nor one word Dutch. And they come to me and they always ask me the bottles, the big bottles. They say, oh, when you give the bottles, oh, the pigeons, they fly. Fly like hell. So it makes them more or less stronger. It is a good hydration in the tissue fluid, and it's also a lot of energy inside.
So really, to keep a loft healthy, providing most other things are right, during the racing season, they're the only 3 products you need.
Well,
you need.
That's right.
If you don't get any other problems, just normal day-to-day problems, you've got canker,
intestinal problems,
etc. Then you've got your electrolytes and your vitamins are building up, and then for the ornithosis complex or respiratory trouble, as it's known in England, those.
I completely agree, totally agree with you.
Now you do advertise in our papers in England, so people can send for this stuff, can't they?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, we send
and it's dispatched from here, isn't it? Because we're going to do later on a little look at the order of dispatch.
We send all over the world, from China to the United States, no problem. Yeah. And we advise also that, and that is where we are maybe pretty strong in. We always hear that we have very good products. Well, it clings a little bit funny out of my mouth, but I hear it, so people tell me, and I have a lot of famous customers. We have maybe all the top guys in Europe use products from us. And they also consult us, and that's what gives
well,
us
you
good
wouldn't
feeling.
have the business you have and employ the number of people that you do if the product wasn't right, because you'd be out of business. It's only because the products are good that you've got the business you have, and that speaks for itself. When we look around it, you see the number of people that are employed here, the number of specialised vets you've got for pigeons, and the fact that people come from France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, all over the continent to visit you.
That's right, but we work hard, we do our best, and we are never there. It's always fighting for improving the products, the service, the advices. Always, huh? We are never there.
I'm going to go to one of the guys that comes to your clinic, Janssen Sagers. He's just a small loft, and he races sprint, and he's been top fancy for 28 out of the last 30 years. So he's used your products for a long time. So we'll get a chance to have a look at those later. I'm going to ask him this question. I'll ask it you as well. If you could just walk away from your clinic with one product, if you were a pigeon fancier, which one would it be?
That's a difficult
question.
That's
but which one
well,
would it be?
Then I have to know, because for the respiratory problems, which is the main problem in the race season, but it's also depending on the loft. If you have a fantastic loft, excellent loft, with not too much draft and cold air inside, then you may not need too much of the ornithosis products, and the loft is excellent. So in that case, I would maybe rather say the BS is the best product.
And then the next one, if you were to take two away with you, which would be the second product?
I think this one is when it's hot.
Those two.
Yeah, and if the loft is not perfect, which is in many occasions not perfect, you can use this. And the funny thing with this is that you can win races with these products for ornithosis. That is the truth. If you give that for 3 days, and then what many people tell, the birds fly 100 meters higher, 100 yards higher, they train better, and they're just like exploding. Why? Because they just, it takes away some germs in the nose, in the respiratory, and then they feel better. And when they feel better, they fly better, and they motivate better.
So once you've got them right, like that, and you might have had to treat for 3 to 4 days to get them like that at the beginning of the season, how do we maintain that? Do you give it them once a week when they come back or before they go?
Yeah, that's of course that's the problem. That's the problem. Depending again on the loft, because many people come back a few times in the season, and then I try to help them. And it works for 3 weeks, they come back, same problems again. And then we start talking about the loft, because of course we like to help the people as good as we can. And therefore I ask them a picture from the loft, a photograph from the loft. We make a sketch from the loft, and I tell them how I think, to my opinion, that the air should go up and not go down, and not too much draft. And of course to keep a consistent condition, it can be wise and advisable to, if you have those problems, to give it regularly, on a regular basis, every 2 weeks, for instance. You could
if you're racing weekly.
Yeah, you could do it
weekly.
Yeah,
but you advocate once every 2 weeks.
You could do, and we have WN, and we have that in the program for over 30 years. That is even my father who found that out. That is preventing for minor respiratory, but the respiratory has increased a little bit. So now we say, start with WN, and from time to time give the only special or the Belgica. And for special races, for a national race or an big aerial race, we say, you don't need to race every week. You can prepare your pigeons. So start and give about 5 days before basketing one of these ornithosis killers, ornithose products. Yeah. And then you see your birds. On many occasions, we get telephone calls after the weekend from thanks you, and the birds fly.
Birds have flown well. Tell me about lofts, because you made a lot of reference to lofts then. I've been coming to Belgium for 30 years.
Yeah.
And what I've found is that the lofts become more and more enclosed, and there are less and less pigeons. So a loft that used to have 12 to 16 widowwood boxes in it, probably 2.5 meters by, sorry, yeah, 2.5 meters by 2 meters. No, yeah 2.5 by
something
2 meters,
like
something like that. It would have 12 to 16 cocks in. Now that loft has 9 cocks in, and it's more closed in. There's no air coming in at the bottom.
Well, yeah. But
tell me your view. What's your view on
lofts? If you have a good loft, you can put the amount of pigeons where the loft is suitable for. I mean, everybody knows that more or less. We say 1 pigeon per cubic meter, but you can also put 1.5 per cubic meter. That's no problem, or maybe 2. However, if people ask me, what do you think about my loft? I always say, show me your pigeon. Show me the pigeon. If they show me the pigeon, I will tell you how good is your loft. And the best way in the wintertime is an aviary. An open aviary, and then you see pigeons smooth and with powder and with nice white wattles. That is excellent. So we try to imitate, which doesn't mean that the loft should be open on all the sides now. when you start closing on one side or two sides, then you have to be careful with the
airflow.
The airflow. But outside in an aviary, it's open. There is no difference in temperature.
Yeah, but you can't keep a widowed cock in an aviary. So I'm saying
right.
that, you know, in a widowed section where you've got, say, 12 cocks, how should that section be? Should you have air coming in at the bottom, or should it only be out at the top and with the tiles? By the way, do you prefer pan tiles on the roof, or?
Yes, of course. Yes.
And
yes.
And an apex roof.
Yes,
V-shaped roof. Yeah.
Like a regular loft. Just
regular loft. You call it a regular loft.
Yeah. But I also like an open top. When the top is a little bit open, you can see it
on the ridge.
And poultry farms, you know,
yes,
they do it.
Seen it.
It's a very good system, because the air in the loft should warm up a little bit, and it should go slowly by itself. We don't need ventilation, as a matter of fact. We don't need electric ventilators. I mean, I'm always scared for that, because easily it works too hard. You attract too much cold air, and then you get this lousy draft, which we just want to prevent. So if it's a natural system, I prefer better with an open top, or make it a little bit open with the tiles. And then the air, I don't like the air coming from the floor, because that's cold air. I'd rather have the air a little bit higher, not too wet and too cold, higher.
So under the eaves, where the loft goes like that, under there and up and out.
Yes, that would be enough. But also where the Sputnik is, for instance. Yes. You know the Sputnik?
Yes.
I prefer sometimes, if it's maybe not enough air, put the window from the Sputnik, put it open, and put some wire in it, some
mesh.
Mesh. For mosquito
mosquito
wire.
mesh, yeah.
And you just have something like this.
So there's a little air coming
framework, you put it in, and then the air is more or less filtered.
Yeah.
That is always better. We need a lot of fresh air, but no stream of air, no current, which makes it cold. That's not good. That's not good.
Right.
Just a little bit.
I think years and years ago, Paul Bostine used to say that if you smoke the cigar in the loft and the smoke just goes up very slowly and disappears,
that's excellent.
The loft's good. Is that right?
That's the way it should be.
It still holds today. That's 30 years ago.
That's the way it should be.
He was a good fancier.
Fantastic.
Very good fancier.
We visited him many times.
And he had a big loft with only a few pigeons in each section.
Many big lofts.
Yeah.
And his wife Julia worked on the computer all the time.
Yeah.
Well, in the last years, of course.
Yeah. Talking about lofts and keeping pigeons in condition, I mean, let's look at the year. So we finished the season racing. Yeah. We separate our pigeons.
Yeah.
It's probably middle of September, end of September. What do we do then?
Well, that's an important period in a pigeon's life, because then it is preparing for molting. It's molting already, of course. Whether you play with light or you try to break the natural process to keep the birds longer in the condition. But very important is before what is always what we put in our brochure. This red brochure, we write also, there are a few times in a pigeon's year's life, in a season, that you have to do something, check, and for instance, before they go into molt, check the droppings for coccidiosis, for worms, look at the pigeons for canker, if you have any doubts about it. For salmonella, you could look at the droppings, you could do the test, an incubation test, not microscopically of course, but an incubation on a plate, you know what I mean?
One or two fanciers in England can do that, but not all of them.
No.
There are very few, and there are very few vets. So what I'm asking you is that for the average fancier who can't find a vet in England who he can go to get some advice, and who doesn't have a microscope, but he's got eyes to see the droppings and he can see the condition of the pigeons. What I'm saying to you is, we finish racing, in the molt, what should we give to the pigeons? Providing they're looking healthy, what should we give to the pigeons to help them? Do we give anything or nothing?
Well, we normally, if you give the good food, and all the commercial foods are pretty good nowadays, I'm quite convinced of that. As a matter of fact, they don't really need something, but if we have done something with our pigeons, if we have braked the molt, if we have flown too long into molting time, too hard, then sometimes the pigeons have to fly to drop a lot of flights, a lot of flights, and then we might give them some extra minerals and amino acids like the sulfur containing methionine, and cysteine, and these things. That is not bad to give them some extra, because they have to, these little organs, these little follicles, little plants of producing plants, you can say, they have to work very hard. They get the ingredients from the blood. And to just to support them a little bit, we could give them some extra minerals, some extra amino acids. Vitamins, yes. Especially
some beer yeast.
Well, the brewer's yeast at that stage is not that important, I think.
Right.
But we have to help them a little bit, because they have to work so hard, these little producing units.
So that brings to mind the fact that people who've been flying youngsters on the darkness system, what you say is correct. They starting third week, fourth week in September, wallop, 3 and 4 flights come out together.
Of course.
So then you're saying at that time they need a little bit more support with a methionine type product.
That's good.
Luke, garlic? At that time?
At that time, it's not so important at that time, I think. But although garlic is always a good product. I mean, also we have found out, scientists also have found out that it also prevents a little bit for salmonella.
Does it?
Really, it has some antibacterial activity, which is very funny, but it is really true. It's really scientific proven that it has some effect against salmonella. So
I'm going to upset you now, because I've found the best way to use garlic. I've tried all the garlic oils and everybody that's in, and I know you do a garlic product. I get a whole bulb, not a segment, a whole bulb, and I cut it in half like that.
Sure.
I have 2 buckets of water, and I put 1/2 on that bucket and 1/2 on that bucket. And after 2 days, I then start to use it. And I've found they get more down feathers out that way than any other way.
You're right. It is true.
Is it right?
It is a good product. Garlic is a good product.
And that costs nothing.
And it's very cheap.
Just have to remind Diane, my wife, to collect some from the grocers, and that's it.
And I like the smell, because it reminds me of good food.
Yeah, that's true. So, we get to the end of the molt, near the end of November, end of October, middle of November, depending. I think in Belgium they tend to be about 2 weeks in front of us. Whether it's the climate or not, I don't know. But I've noticed over here the pigeons are a couple of weeks in front of us.
Molting, you mean, huh?
Yeah, molting, yeah. It might be the climate. It's a bit damper in England than it is here.
Yeah, it might be the climate.
but then paratyphoid. That's the time.
That's the problem.
Talk to us about it, because I think 80% of the pigeons in England, people won't like me saying this, but it's factual, 80% of them suffer. Well, talk to us about paratyphoid.
In the whole season, in the summertime, we hardly ever see paratyphoid salmonella. But you would rather think, well, they fly every week, sit together, so this might be an ideal opportunity for outbreaks of salmonella, which is not true. We never see it in the summer. Well, never. Sometimes. Only one case.
Why?
One case. And then, as you mentioned, the end of September, beginning of October, the 7th flight, they dropped, maybe the 8th flight.
And the weather, quill.
The weather, the day shorter, it's getting more humid. All of a sudden, one telephone call from London, one from Brussels, one from Paris, one from Munich. Salmonella. When the first telephone call comes in the beginning of October, then that same week we maybe have 20 cases, and before we have nothing. So, and this is rather interesting to ask yourself, why does it all of a sudden happen? And I can only think of birds are getting tired, the molt is going to the end, the birds are weakened a little bit, some stress maybe, the changing in the weather. But the truth is that whereas I see one case in the summer, all of a sudden I see 100 cases. Unbelievable.
So I mean, I have a lot of people phone me up and say, I've got a problem with a pigeon, it can't get out of its box, or it can't get back to its box. Do you think it's banged itself? I said, no, it's obviously got paratyphoid. Yes. No, it can't have got paratyphoid. It's not been in a basket. I said, I'll tell you, a pound to a penny, it's got paratyphoid. And you must treat the lot.
Of course.
But I've also found that in the early spring as well. In the early spring they sometimes get it.
Sometimes, but not by far, not as many as
at the end of the molt.
And beside, in the early spring, Dave, I suggest that we see also pigeons that start flying for the first time since being locked up a long period.
Yeah.
And then we also find the phenomenon of pigeons that cannot fly, but fly like this. I mean, they have some problems in the shoulder. But in April, all these pigeons, I find there's many occasions, these are injuries on the shoulder. Right. From the capsule, how do you call it, capsule?
Yeah. The joint.
The joint,
yeah.
the ligament.
Yeah.
That's right. And many times I find it, especially, for instance, the pigeon that is coming home walking. You let him out, all of a sudden one bird is coming home walking. He finds his way. And the two wings on the tail, one is standing up a little bit. Then you know 100% this is never salmonella paratyphoid. This is always an injury from the shoulder, always. So many shoulder injuries, and depending on a little injury or a bigger injury or a complete luxation sometimes, and then it's standing up and never will cure again. And when it's just a little bit damaged, it can cure, and then you have to just lock it up and keep it silent, just like a football player. Just give him some rest with his injury. Give him rest.
But let's get back to that point in time where we've finished the molt.
Yeah.
We're sort of in Belgium, in Holland, you pair up 25th of November. In England, the early people, they pair up 5th to 10th of December, because we don't get our rings till 10th of January. Yeah. You get yours on the 1st of January.
That's right.
So, before we pair the pigeons, do you advise people to treat for paratyphoid?
Well, not really as a routine. I mean, scientifically spoken, I cannot say, yeah, you have to do it or you don't have to do it. But it depends a little bit on the circumstances. If you have a smooth mold, everything went good, and everything looks good, and the droppings look fine, and you have never had the story of a pigeon that couldn't fly anymore, or a pigeon that was crippled, or a pigeon that had one blood keel, as you know.
Blood feather.
Blood feather.
Blood quill.
A blood feather. In that time, in October, is very
significant
for salmonella. And never think that salmonella is an outbreak, a big disease. It's always one or two pigeons, and one with this symptom and another one with this symptom. They can have normal droppings, perfect normal droppings. They may have normal droppings. So never think this is a catastrophe, a big disease with diarrhea and droppings and all the birds are lame. No, that's not true. It's just one pigeon here, one pigeon there. And even you can have a loft with producers locked up, never a bird in or out. They can sit there for 5 years, and after 5 years you can have an outbreak of salmonella. How come? It means salmonella was in there, in the pigeon, in a balance, no problem. And now all of a sudden the balance is broken, and now the salmonella is coming out. This happens many times.
I've been to probably, in fact, we have on video, probably the best 3 middle distance fanciers in Antwerp. Serge van Alsecker, Luc Gierings and Jos Verkammen. They all treat for salmonella at the end of the molt.
Yeah.
They all use that.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that. I know all the 3 fanciers, I know. Yeah. And when they have some special questions, they call me from time to time, and I try to give them, to the best of my knowledge and advice. These are professionals, good fanciers, good flyers. I respect them very much. But yeah, maybe when they have a good experience, that is one thing I know, and they tell me. We are afraid to get salmonella. We know the vaccination is not fantastic, but I'll tell them also very honestly, this is not a guarantee. This can never be a guarantee. There is no guarantee. There is just no guarantee. But they find themselves more safe, and they see the birds react. Most of the time when you give it, you see the birds, more down feathers, the birds look good, so they feel good. They say, okay, my birds improve, so why not?
The fancier feels good as well. Birds are right, you're right.
Yeah. Because they say, no, so we keep doing it. And they call me, is it necessary? I say, oh, no, what is necessary? I mean, if you're sure we don't have the salmonella, you don't get it, don't give it. But when you have a story like a salmonella outbreak in the neighborhood or something like that, or my birds are just not throwing down feathers enough, or some birds have many down feathers, and I look at the color and the wet body muscle is very dry. Well, these are also maybe signs of latent subclinical salmonella paratyphoid. I always ask the down feathers? Do they shine? Are they shiny? And if you don't know, you can, of course, take a sample of the droppings. You can do the incubation, but also that doesn't mean anything. I have seen so many pigeons with clinical salmonella, with joints swollen, with feet joints swollen, with wings swollen, even with twisted necks, which happens sometimes, or with an eye inflamed, the pupil inflamed, so-called panophthalmia. I've seen many of these pigeons, and the droppings were just sometimes normal, sometimes not normal, green or slime. And on many occasions it did not show after incubations any salmonella. So if you not know what you talk about, you say, okay, if you only go for it for the test of the droppings, you would say, no, this is not salmonella, but it is 500% salmonella. So it's dangerous just to look only at the result from the droppings. Dangerous.
So to be safe, I mean, Serge said to me, Van Alsake, he said, I have 4 lofts, Dave. He said, 1 year that loft is clean, that loft is clean, and in the same year, pigeons in that loft, they have paratyphus. He said, but they all mix together. But you went and did he brought the pigeons to you, and he said, I cannot understand it, why I have in one section, but not in another. Yeah. And from that time, he said that now every year, at the end of the molt, he uses Parastop for 14 days. Now, how many of your clients do that?
Many.
The top flyers?
Very many. Very many.
Top flyers?
Yeah. Many do it. Before breeding or before racing.
Yeah, well,
one time, just to make, for themselves, to be sure, I did the very best to prevent them from salmonella.
It's interesting that, because Geerinx only uses it before racing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but Serge, he does it after the molt. And
which is more logic.
Yeah.
Which is more logic.
Okay, so we've got our pigeons right. We pair them together now. Breeding, anything special? Vitamins, beer yeast, anything you recommend?
Everything looks good. When you work with old pigeons, old producers, old breeding pigeons, in an aviary, I mean, okay, then it is very good to give them extra minerals, extra grit, extra vitamins, electrolytes. It's important because these birds getting older, you know, and all the pigeons, sometimes they have, like we are getting older, we need sometimes a little bit more vitamins.
Now, once we've finished breeding, then we're sort of coming on to the racing season. Anything special then? I mean, we've treated the pigeons with Parastop. We're coming into the season, so we've when they're on eggs prior to the season, or just prior to the season, you use trichomonas?
As a rule, we do that already 30 years. We advise people to treat the birds preventively, which goes very well. You can prevent very good canker. So we say give on fresh eggs for 5 days some BS. Well, and many people do it, and I think we invented this idea, and many people over the whole world are doing. And you find a lot of down feathers. The birds look nicer, and it gives a good prevention for canker for the youngsters that are coming up.
Right.
It not only prevents for canker, also for hexameta. Right. Hexameta, you know, that is the intestinal form of canker,
yeah.
Which can be a problem in young birds after weaning. But if you give the prevention, you have very little problems with canker. Very little.
Right. So just prior to racing, we prevent canker. We give them the canker treatment for 5 days with this product BS, and then ornithos?
Not really. No? Well, all depends, Dave.
On the pigeons.
On the pigeons. I always ask, tell me how your pigeons are. Tell me how they are. How do they are? Are they closed? Are they shining? The feathers around the ears? Or if you just cannot explain, show the pigeons, and then all depends on the pigeons. If the pigeons are not good today, these guys from France, for instance, these pigeons were not very good. And then I had another guy, and his pigeons were just marvelous. They were already in condition. We don't need to have top condition, not yet.
No, but health. You need health.
Health, because we have to have a certain basis to come to the top condition.
Yeah.
The top condition comes by motivation and by the Deward system. But if you have a bad condition now, it takes us more time, a longer time to get at this stage, because otherwise if you're not reached this stage, you never get the top conditions. So we have to get here, and the sooner the better. The sooner the better. Same as in sportsman.
So you say health, form,
Top form.
super form.
That's right.
So providing prior to racing the pigeons are healthy, you don't do a lot apart from trichomonas treatment.
Well, some yeah, and what we discussed.
Yeah.
If you can, because if you give such a treatment for salmonella, in many big lofts we have salmonella without knowing, but all of a sudden it can come up, and if you give a treatment, you lower down the infection pressure. We call it infection pressure.
Right.
The more virus, the more bacteria, in this case, we have, the higher the pressure, the more chance we have for an outbreak.
So you lower the pressure and then
you lower the pressure.
Yeah.
We suppress the infection. We try to repress, and then it's under control. It's in a balance. The body can take care of it. But when it's growing above a certain level, we get an outbreak. So we always want to push down that level.
Interesting. What about, because paratyphoid is such a problem, salmonella, do you advocate vaccinating at all?
Yeah, I wish I could. I wish there was a fantastic vaccine. I wish. But so far I haven't found the miracle vaccine.
Right.
I mean, Dave, when you vaccinate your birds for a certain disease, you do it with the idea the birds don't get the disease. When you vaccinate your birds against salmonella, you never ever are sure, or you can sleep on 2 ears, that your birds don't get the disease.
Right.
I mean, you're still in the dark. It can still happen even after the vaccination. Within 3 weeks, you can have an outbreak of salmonella. I've seen that many times.
I mean,
and there are people that vaccinate every year, and more or less by vaccinating, when they have the salmonella in their bodies, you make it chronically.
More,
and if you stop vaccinating and you treat them well, the problem is over. And sometimes people have problems years and years in a row. Also, especially fancy pigeon fanciers, because these pigeons are not as strong as our birds because there's no permanent selection. They have a lot of problems with salmonella, and they vaccinate 2 times, 3 times, and they make it more or less chronic.
So, before you vaccinate, you should treat. So you lower it.
That is one reason.
Lower the pressure?
Yeah, absolutely,
and then vaccinate.
absolutely, because you are vaccinating in a bunch of pigeons, a flock of pigeons, where you never know if there's salmonella or not. You just never know. You never know. You cannot cut into pieces all the pigeons and test every organ. You don't do it. So, roughly spoken, there is always 1 or 2 pigeons in a big flock with salmonella. Under control, no problem. But if you start vaccinating there, the balance from the bacteria and the antibodies, this is the antigen, the bacteria, this is the antibody. If you start vaccinating, you do something with that balance. And many times there's no problem, but it doesn't give a very high immunity either, but you don't disturb too much. But sometimes you disturb. You put in the vaccine, you put in more antigen, that antigen, this is your antibody. Your antibody goes to your antigen, to your vaccine, and then the little bit of salmonella, which is alive, finds no more antigens, no more resistance, and grows.
So you've got a problem.
You get an outbreak.
So you don't advocate vaccinating at all?
Not really. Well, should I? Because we don't do it ourselves.
Your opinion.
Henk de Weerd never vaccinates. How can I advocate to all my customers, my clients, my friends? You must do it,
but you don't.
I don't do it. I mean, this makes no sense. I don't do it. I would do it immediately if I had a good vaccine that would work. But well, it is so disputable. For that reason, we don't advocate it.
There was another question I have to ask.
And beside, the whole world is all the vets. One says, yeah, you should do it. The other one says, no, you should not do it. The other one says, yeah, you should do it twice. Nobody is. There is no discussion about paramyxo vaccination. Everybody does that. No discussion, because that works. But all the discussions about salmonella means that it is just not a good vaccination.
You've answered one question, paramyxo. You think it's important to vaccinate?
Oh, it's so important.
Colombovac?
yes, why not? But
Not an oil-based one?
well, I have problems with oil-based vaccines because we have seen it since '81, and it was our good colleague Le Mailleux in Belgium. Paul Le Mailleux is a very nice colleague, very smart colleague, and he advocated careful with the oil vaccine basis. Because after repeated shots you may have some knots in the neck, and we found that. In the beginning we only had the chicken vaccine, and then we found, really, we tested those, and we tried with warm vaccine, with a big needle, with a small needle, and inject soft and smooth and slowly, but some birds just made knots. And I mean, maybe only 1 or 2 or 3%, but if it's a good pigeon, and the pigeon is lame afterwards and cannot fly, we don't feel happy.
So you have a water-based vaccine?
We use the Colombovac. Yeah.
Colombovac.
Yeah, but the other vaccines are good and also give a good immunity, no problem, but we prefer because it gives less problems, to my opinion.
What about the combination of Colombovac with pox and paramyxin?
Well, honestly spoken, that's still okay for paramyxin, but for pox, I prefer the old-fashioned way.
Right.
A brush and scratch it into the skin. I prefer the old way.
You don't get a lot of problems in England with it. There are certain areas where they get the problems, and I know lots of people have been asking the question, shall we use the double vaccine? But you've answered it for me now.
For young birds, the first time I would always use the old method in the skin, brush, tear out 10 feathers, brush, brush, brush. For repeated, when they get older, if you want to do it, it's easy, and you might give the combination, but for the first time in young birds, because they're most susceptible to pox, and you know pox happen every 5-6 years in a club, or if you're lucky, once every 10 years, and then it stays out for a long period, because then many birds got the virus got in their body and make a natural immunity, and the natural immunity is a lifetime immunity. So same as myxomatosis in rabbits. I mean, it comes and then it stays out 5-6 years and it comes back. It's always the same as these viruses.
Just before we go and have a look around the clinic, there is just one other subject I'd like to talk to you about, and that's young bird sickness or adenovirus. Do you think it's on the wane now a bit?
It's changing. I've seen this 20 years ago already. It started in Belgium. Up to me, it started in Belgium.
As long ago as 20 years?
Yeah. If you throw a stone in a pond, you can see where it goes. And the middle of that pond was Belgium. And then,
was it?
Yeah, really. And then you see it coming to Holland, to Germany, very late in Germany, to England, in the States, in China.
About 85 to
all
England.
over.
About 85 to England, I think. 85, 86.
Which is 20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah.
So fast it goes. But we see it about 20, 25 years ago. And I really...
So hang on a minute. No, sorry. Hang on a minute. No. About 92 it was, sorry.
Which is 13 years ago. 13 years
13
ago.
Years, yeah.
But in the meantime, we had it in England already.
Yeah.
And what we really suggest is by massive use of cortisones, which is on the doping list in Belgium, in young birds, massive use to stop the mold. And when you stop the mold, it's not for aerodynamic reasons that they fly better, no. It's for hormonal reasons, because the birds fly home on sexual hormones, the homing ability. And when they molt, they're influenced by the molting hormones and not by the sexual hormones. So when you suppress the molting hormones, the motivation is better and they fly better. And by the massive use of cortisones in Belgium in young birds, we think that maybe it suppressed the immunity of the bird, and for that reason viruses find less resistancy and could fly out of normally.
So you think that the reason we started with the adenovirus, the young bird sickness, is specifically down to the use of cortisone? That's what started it, because it lowered the immune system.
That's what we believe, absolutely.
And it allowed the virus to come in.
Absolutely. Whereas before there was
enough resistance, so they got a good immune system. It lowers the immune system, cortisone.
Absolutely. We are quite convinced.
Right. Just talk to me about young bird sickness now. We've said we think it's on the wane. People are learning to manage it better, particularly in England. It's not so many problems now.
That's right.
But you get young bird sickness. But I mean, I think the problem is, I can detect young bird sickness way before we get bad droppings and everything else. It's very easy. I mean, pigeons start acting stupidly. Your young birds might be doing an hour's exercise. Suddenly, they start doing an hour and 50 minutes exercise, and you think, whoa, these are better. Not necessarily.
No.
And then suddenly 3 or 4 will come back after a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then they'll start doing silly things. They will not come into the loft sometimes
They
when
don't
you call
listen.
them.
They're
They
no
don't listen.
hungry. No hungry.
Wandering about thinking, how do I get in? The head's going. That's way before they start holding the corn.
That's right.
And then it's in 3 stages, isn't it? It's that stage, then it's holding the corn, and then it goes into the intestine.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely right.
When do we start with the treatment, and what should we do?
Well, as you mentioned, Dave, I mean, first signs, when they don't listen, they used to listen, they used to fly well around the loft, and then all of a sudden they come back on the loft and you call them in, you want to, like the old...
Whistle or shake the tin, yeah, whatever.
They just don't listen,
Signal.
they just are not hungry, they don't come in. This is the first sign of the beginning of adeno. So at that moment you have to treat them.
Then.
Of course, already. But the problem is always, if they don't eat, they don't drink. If they don't drink, they don't get the medicine properly inside. Then you can give the medicine on the grain, but if they don't eat, that doesn't help either. So the birds that start to vomit and have diarrhea, and it goes very quick, you know. Today you have 1 and tomorrow you have 6, and after tomorrow you have 2 dead, and it goes up to 50-60%. So treat them immediately, and if they don't eat or drink, put something of the drug of choice at that time you have, put it inside their mouths. Help them, because you can very good treat them very well. Most of the time we can very well cure the pigeons. Really.
Best thing is light food 3 or 4 times a day, isn't it? And then hopefully they'll go for a drink each time they've had a bit of food.
Something like that.
You know.
So, but also the problem has changed a little bit. In the beginning, many birds die, and later, then more or less they get more resistance against the disease. It's adenovirus, we believe. That's what the universities in Ghent told us. Hard to find, though. Hard to find the adenovirus. They find inclusion bodies in the liver, in young birds, and then the E. coli. Because why the E. coli? Because we can cure very good with antibiotic combinations. If it was only a virus, the antibiotic would not help. So it is E. coli is the main problem. The main problem.
So therefore, there's only one cure for it. You've got to get an antibiotic into them.
Yes, and because they dehydrate, losing a lot of fluid. Also,
electrolyte.
Of course.
Electrolytes and an antibiotic as soon as you spot it.
Of course.
5 days?
Yeah, well, most of the times. I always say you have to see a significant improvement after 3 days. If it doesn't help after 3 days, it won't help you after 3 months. You have to see improvement after 3 days. If not, use another drug. But we never know before, that's the problem. Sometimes we say, use A, and if it doesn't work after 3 days, very sorry, now you use B, and most of the time it works.
What are you using now then? What do you advocate?
Well, we started with 4-in-1 mix, and it's still pretty effective. I get a lot of good reports, but when this medicine A didn't work.
Some people would say that's the scattergun approach.
What do you mean?
Well, they will say that's the scattergun approach. It's a wide spectrum, so we might get something.
Yeah.
But obviously, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. You've used it and you found it to be right. So
I mean, we have no choice. People come to me and they say, "Doctor, my birds are dying. Please help me." And my neighbor's birds are dying. So what can I do? I can say, "Okay, I'm a scientist. Okay, sorry, bring me those birds." Now we sent the liver to a lab, and then it takes about 14 days, and we wait and we wait and we wait.
No good.
So all the birds are dead, and then we find, oh, it's adeno coli. This is a good drug, or maybe only 2 ingredients out of 4.
Well.
But then I'm too late.
How many of the number of times you prescribe that, does it work nearly 99%?
Yeah, let's say 95%. And if this doesn't work, this will work. The AMCO. And but still there are some cases, maybe 1 on 100, which is still not very, where it is not immediately effective, and so we have always something by hand as well. But
let me have a look at that.
But most of the time,
is that the latest one, AMCO?
AMCO, but we also have a fluid one now. But I just don't want to mention it, makes people, it's confusing and...
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is that, particularly in England, like the fanciers would like to find something that is more or less guaranteed to help them with the problem.
Yeah,
and these products can be purchased. I mean,
Yeah.
You do advertise in the racing pigeon,
Yeah.
and we can get them from there. And I see that in your book. Are these products in the book? They are, aren't
They
they?
are in the book, yes.
Well, when we get the video ready for distribution, we've got about 2,000 subscribers.
Okay.
Which we send it, the send subscriptions in for the paper, abonnements as you call them. We'll include one if you give us a couple of thousand of these.
Of course.
On a weekly basis, just for 1 week, and then we'll send them out, and then the fanciers can see the products, and then they know how to send for them, don't
they? And when they have problems, and
they know how to send for them,
and they cannot be helped in England, they're fine to call me. I'm there. That's my job.
Just before we go and have a look around the clinic, drug testing. Drug testing.
Yeah.
For anabolic steroids, etc. They're banned in our country as they are here.
Yes.
And last year was the first year we tested for pigeons. Bit of controversy about it because we're sending the droppings away to South Africa, believe it or not.
That's far.
It is, isn't it? You know, I think it takes them about 3 to 4 weeks to get the result.
That's funny, and then with the temperature and during the transport. That's funny to me. Sounds funny because, as far as I know, in Belgium there's Professor Courtijn, which is an authority. And that's a doping lab, and we always send everything, our organization at least, to Brussels, to Professor Courtijn.
And how soon can you have the result?
I think that can be done pretty. I'm not familiar with that, Dave, but what I hear, I think within 1 week should be known within 1 week, and they do a very good testing, excellent, very good.
That's what we should be doing in England, then obviously, and not sending over to South Africa.
And the main problem in drugs testing, in doping testing in drugs is these cortisones, because so far I think the cortisones are the main problem, and with cortisones you can manipulate the race. If you fly young birds, treat it in the months they usually molt in July, August, September. Treat it with hormones or not with hormones. It's the difference between racing a racehorse with a donkey.
Is it?
Yeah. It is. There is a solution if you play with light. You don't need cortisone, of course. You play with light, also the birds keep their feathers. Yeah.
Well, I would never have run like Ben Johnson, but Ben Johnson ran better because he had because he used the products.
Yes, of course.
As a lot of the athletes did and still do.
He used nandrolone, which was an anabolic steroid. However, in pigeons, we do not believe that anabolic steroids will help. Because we do not want our pigeons to build up a lot of protein and muscle. Because that's too heavy. So we like rather a muscle, but not a heavy muscle, because that diminishes the what I believe the speed.
I remember going to Neil, who sat over there. What was the guy I went to see who had the young birds that flew?
Christ.
No, not Gus Christians. Dams. Neil Dams. He's dead now, Neil Dams.
Oh, okay.
He had 13 hens, young hens, and they were flying absolutely fantastic. And they were all on big youngsters, no cocks in there, just these young hens, bred in the same year. They'd probably be about 9 months old, the hens. And yeah, but these pigeons, as soon as I saw them, I said, "You're using drops." Cortisone, he said, "Yeah." So I said, "How often do you give them?" He said, "Well, 3-4 times a week, Dave, in the eye." I said, "How long do they fly?" He said, "When I let them out. I don't know when they're going to come back." He said they'll fly 3 and 4 hours every day. But don't you think as well that helps the pigeons fly through the pain barrier, the cortisone?
Well, that's what everybody suggests. However, but these are all comparisons with humans. It would give a higher glucose mirror in the blood. It would the pain border barrier would be higher. Yeah. But I think we do not know enough exactly in pigeons how that works. You cannot just compare a mammal with a pigeon. Personally, I believe that it does something with the motivation due to more activity of the sexual system. That's what I believe.
Right. Now, just before we get up and move from here, you believe then that if you were going to have pigeons drug tested, you'd send the sample droppings off to the university in
Oh, of course.
In
Why?
Brussels. Did you say Brussels?
Yes, why should I go through the North Pole and then back to the South Pole and then, if it's just by hand? I mean, and such a good lab, international acknowledged, I mean, why make it so difficult?
Right, that's fine. We're in the clinic now, or in one of the rooms of the clinic, and Henk's just taken this pigeon out of the cage there. It's been brought to you. How long have you had the pigeon in there?
Oh, it's already 4 weeks here, I think.
4 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem?
Well, it couldn't fly anymore, and so the fancier was worried. Was it an accident or whatever was it? And then we found out that it was salmonella immediately because it had a swollen joint here, hard, which is always hard at this position.
Yeah.
Well, so we didn't do any other test because it's very obvious.
But he brought it in because it couldn't fly?
That's right. That was also skinny, and the droppings were not so good in the beginning, and then we treated it. However, this will never cure again because there is damage in the joint, but the salmonella is over because you can see it, you can feel it, you can look at the droppings, and you can look underneath. The color is marvelous. I see no more all down feathers. We see the pink breast flesh, and we see the little veins, even the little veins, which I love to see in a birding condition. The little blood vessels, which means there is a good circulation, oxygenation. That's why you see this. And you can breed from this hand.
Without any problems? It would not pass it on to the young ones?
No, absolutely not. No problem. In such a condition, it won't pass it on to the youngsters because it is ready with the salmonella. However, you have to put them in a low on the ground because it can only fly half a yard, something like that.
It was a good pigeon. Was it a good pigeon?
This is a good Jensen pigeon, yeah, excellent, from a very good loft in Holland. But it can happen, you know.
Flat tongue. It's just because it keeps moving.
It's a good pigeon, it's a good condition now, and looking active and.
Yeah, flattish tongue.
That's what we like. We don't like to push it up. However, this can also be on a certain moment. But he's getting better, you know. You see, he's active. He looks around. He's got some powder. And this is not an ideal...
And it's 4 weeks you've had it. You've been treating it for 4 weeks?
Yeah, it has been treated for 3 weeks. Now we don't give no treatment, not anymore. We give some para capsules every day. Right. And it reacted very good. However, and sometimes this disappears completely, but not after 1 month. Then it's just too much damage.
And do you say sometimes you see it there with it as well?
Well, we call it predilection locations. It's always in a joint. The first joint is here, of course. That's the shoulder. Could happen here. An infection of the joint, swollen joint, could happen here. Yeah. This joint, which is more or less the elbow. The pigeon here. This is joint. You see, a little point, which is normal. But then when it's swollen, it's like a little grape hanging over it on both sides. And of course here, this place, here is mostly soft. Here is always hard. And here
you can see that it's thicker, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you compare the two.
Yeah, thicker there.
If you compare the two, you can see it straight away. And then here's also a little joint, and it's very seldom I see it here in this joint. Yeah. A little swelling. That can happen, but not too often. And now it happened after the mold, but when it's happening in the mold, sometimes we also find blood feathers, one blood feather or so. When we have a swollen joint, it's only one joint, on one place, and never in 2 wings, and never in 2 joints. Here, or here, or here, but never on 2 wings, and only one place.
And sometimes you find that a pigeon that's got para will sit down and it'll have 1 wing on the floor.
Yes. Many times they just drop the wing down.
Drop it,
And good remark. And when you have a pigeon like this, like this is never salmonella. Never. It's always injury from this joint here. This joint. Sometimes a luxation. Sometimes some of these ligaments are a little bit damaged or broken. Then it pushes up the wing. And then such a bird, which happens a lot of times in the beginning, in April, because they have been locked up and they fly, they're happy to fly, they fly around, sometimes heavy, and sometimes they have to escape from a bird of prey, sometimes they are so happy to fly for the first time after months, and they just miss wires, all of a sudden they see wires and they have to big
Well, it's
force.
Like, yeah, it's like an
force.
athlete. If he doesn't loosen up properly and he doesn't,
Absolutely.
you know, get his training right, then
Absolutely.
he gets
Also,
injuries. Yeah.
Absolutely. Also, when it's windy, very windy, there are a lot of force. You can imagine how
Yeah.
big force all these small joints.
Yeah.
And then something breaks, and then the birds go down like this, and they come home. And the fancier calls me the bird like this. I said, he came walking home. He said, yes, he came walking home. Unbelievable.
And you know straight away.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so that's a pigeon that's had power, which you're parrot
That's okay.
which is ready to go back to the fancier in a
Yeah.
few days' time?
Yeah,
Yeah, a few days' time.
we'll tell him it's
And
okay now.
he'll be able to breed with it?
Of course. Not always, only in this condition. And many times you see the turning point for the disease, that all of a sudden you find a lot of down feathers.
Yeah.
You treat such a bird for 1 or 2 weeks, and then
right.
all of a sudden you find loaded with down feathers, and then this is the turning point. Now he's getting better. That's it.
Yeah, it's like when you give a treatment in a loft and suddenly you go into the loft and you find down feathers all over the place. You know it's coming back. Yeah.
That's right.
So you've got some other pigeons in the clinic? which
Yeah, we have another.
okay,
Yeah, that's right. We have a pigeon here.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we take just a regular swab, a routine swab from a pigeon. I put here the pincet with a little bit of tissue. We can go deeply into the throat if we need to. You see how far? We don't lose the tissue because then we have a problem. Okay, and then we press the drop out on an object glass. And we put on a cover glass, and then we look under the microscope. When this looks very grey, there's a lot of chance that there is already canker inside. If it's very clear, not too much chance to find canker. So now, I'll have a look here. And here we find some canker. Yeah, you see here the living protozoas, even with their little arms, the flagellates. That's the flagellates. You see the flagels.
Yeah.
And how they move and how they. You can imagine if you have this many or thousands on your mucous membranes that it gives irritation, and therefore it can give the disease.
Would you treat that pigeon for trichomonas, or would you say it's acceptable?
It depends on the time when we find it. If it's just there in a time where you are not breeding and not racing, and it is only a little bit.
So it's nothing to worry about.
And the bird looks good and no slime and no yellow in the throat. We would just leave it without any problem. And we would say you have to treat them, but not really now. You can do it in a month or so. Huh?
Yeah, because I've seen them much worse than that.
Yeah. It's like grapes.
And
then you have to treat. And what I always do is smell. After taking a swab, I always smell. As a routine, I smell. Because many times we find the flagellate, the trichomonas, the canker, which causes canker. But it's not always harmful, not always. But when you smell and you have a bad smell, then you know there's a bacterial anaerobic component, and then you have to treat, because that's very bad. You have to treat it anyway one time, but especially when it stinks, you have to treat immediately. This is good. But you see how they move. Interesting, eh? And these little spots here, these little black spots, those are all bacteria.
Right.
But they have no significance, because that's normal to have bacteria. You can find many bacteria, even Streptococcus coli. Even yeast you can find without significance, without any significance.
It's not yeast.
No, yeast is looking different. This one has no yeast, but
that's like little ears on it, yeast, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. We hardly ever treat yeast, hardly ever, because it goes away by itself after a few days. It's not a real problem here. Even if we find it, we don't.
You don't bother. No.
We don't bother.
Probiotics? No?
No need. It just disappears. I mean, if you give your pigeons, for instance, Provost yeast, you find them. And also the droppings, and it means nothing. A little bit yeast.
This is the way you vaccinate for paramyxin?
That's right.
Yeah.
If you're not quite sure if you have the good location, you take the middle line of the median line of the pigeon.
Yeah.
This line divides the pigeon into same half, and then you join the wings.
Yes.
And here in this cross.
In there.
You have around.
Plenty of soft, plenty of skin and that to go into without going into the bulb.
Nearly a square inch to do it. And then we do it subcutaneously. We always tear up a few feathers.
Yeah.
And then we tear it up, and the position is like this, downwards, and to the side. We like pushing up.
Yeah. You're not going to inject me.
No. Like pushing up, like a tent.
Pull it up,
And put it.
Because in our country, the fancier vaccinator doesn't have to take it to the vet.
Okay.
The fancier
that's
vaccinator.
okay.
Now they used to say vaccinate upwards. I always said vaccinate downwards.
Downwards, because I explain. Because like a radiator, the pigeon has many blood vessels on this side and on this side. Many blood vessels. That is to keep him cool. He opens it. That is the way to keep the body's temperature okay. Because it cannot sweat. So it uses this to open. So if you inject too much on the side, you inject in the blood vessel and the bird is dying in your hands.
Right, so you want to be in that area there.
Here. So it's never an allergic shock when a pigeon dies. No, it's a mistaken injection. So don't believe any vet when he kills your bird that it was allergic, because I have maybe vaccinated hundreds of thousands and I never had an allergic shock. So tear it up, and this is the position. That's the safe place here. And better vaccinate your pigeon with an empty crop. Because if it's full, the crop is full,
down there, you can't pull it up.
You tend to push into the crop, and the vaccination doesn't work.
That's handy. That's handy. Last night, before I visited the clinic of Henk de Weerd, I was quite fortunate because I bumped into him in a restaurant, and over a few nice glasses of red wine, we had a long conversation about pigeons, and I personally find him very, very interesting and very, very knowledgeable. And I just hope that the fanciers who take the video do get something from it. It wasn't designed to sell his products, it's designed to help fanciers get their pigeons into better condition. I just think that the products he uses are good. I know a lot of fanciers in Belgium that use them, there's no question about it. Some of the top fanciers in Belgium, in fact most of the top fanciers, use some of his products. And we're going to go and look at a fancier who's a disciple of his by the name of Janssen Segers, who was a sprint man and wins many first prizes. After this session here, we'll go and have a look at him and just see the products he uses and how successful he is. But as I said, it's been an interesting day. I found it tremendously interesting, and I'm sure that the fanciers in England too will find it interesting. Henk, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dave. It was my pleasure, and hopefully we will do it again, because we have a lot more to discuss, I think,
sure, lovely.
in a short time.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.